From KVUE News in Austin, you're watching Texas This Week with Ashley Goodo.
Thank you for watching Texas This Week. In less than 1 month, candidates planning to run in the midterms will start filing to be on the ballot. But the big question, will a panel of federal judges allow the state to use its newly redrawn congressional district map, redone to help Republicans pick up more seats, or not? Arguments in a lawsuit challenging that map wrapped up this week. We're recapping what they said, but first, let's get to the 3 things you need to know in Texas politics. Texas Governor Greg Abbott sent 200 state National Guard troops to Illinois this week to support President Donald Trump's crime crackdown, and the troops are not receiving a warm welcome. The state of Illinois and city of Chicago are suing to stop the use of the Texas Guard, and on Friday, a federal judge blocked the deployment, issuing a temporary restraining order that stops the deployment in the state for at least 14 days. Another Republican is entering the race for U.S. Senate. U.S. Representative Wesley Hunt from the Houston area launched his bid on Monday. Hunt has reportedly been testing the waters for months. The Texas Tribune reports groups affiliated with the 2-term congressman spent around $6 million on ads boosting his profile around the state over the summer. And so with that, incumbent Senator John Cornyn is facing 2 challengers in next year's primary, Hunt and Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton. And new polling from the University of Houston and Texas Southern University shows Senator Cornyn and General Paxton are in a dead heat. Among Republican voters, 34% say they're backing Paxton, 33% say Cornyn, and 22% are supporting Hunt. For Democrats, U.S. Representative Jasmine Crockett, who has not entered the race, has a commanding lead. But the real takeaway, in hypothetical matchups, former Congressman Colin Allred performs better than Crockett and State Representative James Tallarico. Not only does he perform better than the other Democrats, Allred comes within a point of Paxton, 47% to 48%, and within 2 points of Cornyn, putting him at 46% to the incumbent's 48%, well within the margin of error. A panel of federal judges in El Paso is now deciding if the state's newly drawn congressional district map is constitutional and can be used in the midterm election. The mid-decade redistricting effort would help Republicans pick up 5 seats in the U.S. House of Representatives. The civil rights groups suing the state says it does that by diluting the voting power of black and brown voters. Eleanor Klibanoff, law and politics reporter for the Texas Tribune, was in El Paso. She joined me to talk about what was said in court. So arguments are wrapped up this week in a 10-day trial talking about Texas's newly drawn congressional district map. Walk us back. How did we get to the panel of judges in El Paso?
It has been quite an unusual redistricting process. Not unusual for these maps to end up in court, of course, but how we got here was very atypical. Instead of waiting till 2031, when Texas was next due to redistrict, lawmakers decided to redraw the map over the summer, just the congressional map, after pressure from President Donald Trump to add more Republican seats from Texas. A lot of other things happened in the meantime. We had a quorum break. We had 2 special sessions, but the maps passed and immediately were challenged and brought before these judges.
And so let's talk about the lawsuit against this map. What are groups alleging?
So these are the same plaintiffs who are also challenging the 2021 maps. That case is still ongoing. They are basically asking these same judges, take a look at this new map, put this at the front of the line, and put a block on it before the 2026 election. They're saying that it's racially discriminatory, it dilutes black and brown voters, voting power, and it's sort of a racial gerrymander is the term that they're using.
And so when the arguments were being made in court, talk to us about what was said, because one of the things that's really interesting is, you know, the president, for folks who may not remember exactly how this all happened, the president said, I want 5 more seats, Texas, make it happen. We had the special session. Well, actually, the first special session call came before that revelation was made, but we didn't have an agenda yet. The governor put out the agenda. Sure enough, it was on there. And there was this letter from the DOJ that was sent that said, we think that the maps that you previously drawn were drawn based on race, which is unconstitutional, so you need to redraw it. So you had this kind of request from the president, sort of this letter from the DOJ. And initially, Republicans were kind of talking about the letter during the hearings, right?
Right. Republicans originally were talking a lot about the letter. And then the side sort of switched when it came to the letter. So the Supreme Court has said that if you draw a map for partisan gain, the courts can't really intervene on that. And so now, the state is really pointing to the president pressuring them to add 5 more Republican seats, saying this is just about partisan gain. We didn't look at race. Race has nothing to do with this. This is just partisan gain. And the other side is saying, well, but you do have this letter that says redraw these districts because they're majority non-white and because they don't comply with certain parts of the Voting Rights Act anymore. And that sort of, for the plaintiffs at least, is like the original sin that makes this whole process racially motivated.
Texas sort of has a history when it comes to its maps as well.
Yes, so every year since the Voting Rights Act was passed, at least one map that Texas has drawn has been struck down by a court for being racially discriminatory. They have a bad history of drawing racially, or at least maps that courts have found to be racially discriminatory. Of course, lawmakers and the state argue, that's not what happened here. This was a really unique situation, just partisan gain. But the plaintiffs saying, every decade we're back here having to say the same thing, that you guys don't have a good track record on this. We're going to ask the judges to really, make the same finding again.
Let me ask you this. If maps are drawn for partisan gain, but at the expense of communities of color, is that constitutional?
There's very fine lines here, but broadly speaking, no. If you drew a map that purely partisan gain and it just accidentally happened to be drawn in a way that discriminated against certain groups, you might have a stronger case, but the impact is still the same, right? To make a claim of sort of intentional racial discrimination, they would have had to take that into account. But what the plaintiffs point to is all the times that state lawmakers said, well, we drew this district, it's majority Hispanic now. We drew this district, it's majority Black. And they're 50.5% Hispanic, 50.5% Black. They're saying you paid a little bit too much attention to race. You were moving people around with a little bit too much attention to race. And this is what makes these cases so complicated is, you can both pay too much attention or not enough attention. Right. And you can make an error in both directions. So
what was particularly interesting was there was all this talk about the man who draws the maps.
Yes.
So when the map was being debated, there was a lot of talk about him. He took the stand this week.
Yes, Adam Kincaid, sort of the Wizard of Oz type, it seems like sometimes, certainly the way the plaintiffs portray it. He was well documented. He drew the 2021 maps for Texas. He's sort of the GOP's map drawer in chief. He's drawn most of the red state maps, and he's very sort of savvy about this and very smart about how can we maximize these maps for Republicans. And the question of whether or not he drew the 2025 map was always a little bit hard to pin down during this process. Republican lawmakers now say, well, of course he did. We weren't hiding that. But they were sort of denying it or finding ways to sort of sidestep the question during the process.
Oh, yeah, some saying they didn't know who he was.
They didn't know who that was. They had never heard his name before, things like that. And part of it is that the lawmakers want legally to be able to say, I didn't see any data. I didn't see any racial data. I couldn't have drawn a discriminatory map because Adam Kincaid drew it and, he verified that it was legal and that's, my hands are clean. And so a little bit of moving the cup on that, but he did testify this week and, I think laid out pretty cleanly that he did draw the map, that he worked with the White House to do so and the RNC, and that this map really was just given to Texas lawmakers, which was sort of the rumor throughout the process.
So we already established that the clock is ticking on all of this. What happens next?
So we are awaiting a ruling from this 3-judge panel on whether or not Texas can use this map in the upcoming election. The judges and both sides have alluded to the fact that we need that ruling quickly because whichever way it goes, it almost certainly will be appealed to the Supreme Court. Because it's a redistricting case, the Supreme Court will have to decide one way or the other whether or not to allow the maps to go forward. So we are not yet done with this legal battle.
No, and in less than a month, this all has to happen, we should note.
Yes.
In less than a month.
Yes.
Ideally.
Right, and the court has said, you can move those deadlines. It's happened before. I don't think anyone's rooting for that outcome. I think people want this resolved.
Of course, we will let you know what that panel of judges decides when they make a decision. That's Texas This Week.